Ever wonder what the real pulse of marriage and divorce in America is? I mean, we hear stats thrown around all the time, but what if you could boil it all down to what happens in a single minute? Well, let's get right into it and find out not just what that number is, but what it really tells us about relationships today.
And there it is, the number at the heart of all this. Using the very latest data, it turns out 1.89 divorces are finalized every single minute in the United States. Think about that. That's almost 2 couples legally ending their marriage every 60 seconds, day in and day out.
And if you zoom out from that 1 minute, the scale is just staggering. It adds up to almost 1 million divorces a year, 992,677 to be exact. I mean, that's like an entire city's worth of couples starting over every single year.
Right, and that's the real question, isn't it? Because a number like 1.89 isn't just a random statistic. It's like the tip of this giant sociological iceberg. To get what it means, we have to dig in and figure out, how it's even calculated, what's shaping it, and maybe the most surprising part, which way this number has been trending for the last 40 years.
Okay, so first things first, we've got to put on our data detective hats. Because it turns out, just trying to count divorces in a country as huge as the United States is, well, it's a surprisingly tricky puzzle. So the US government basically has 2 main ways of keeping score. And get this, they tell 2 totally different stories. On one side, you have the data from the CDC, and on the other, you have the info from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey, or the ACS.
And here's why that CDC number is way, way lower. It's just not the full picture. See, the CDC has to rely on each state to send in their divorce data, and that whole system is kind of broken. It means they're missing info from some of the biggest states in the country, like California, which you can imagine totally throws off the national count.
And this is where the American Community Survey, the ACS, swoops in to save the day. Instead of messing with messy court records, they just ask people. They survey a massive, representative sample of Americans and ask a simple question. Hey, did you get divorced in the last year? This direct approach gives us a much more accurate look at what's really going on.
And that brings us back to our big number. The ACS data gives us that 2023 total of nearly 1 million divorces. So it's from this much more complete number that we get our 1.89 divorces per minute. This is the real deal.
So now that we've nailed down the how many, let's get into the when and the where. Because that 1.89 is just a flat average. In reality, the divorce clock actually ticks faster at certain times of the year and in certain parts of the country.
Come on, we've all heard this one, right? The idea that the moment New Year's is over, there's a mad dash to the lawyer's office. It's a really powerful and sticky myth.
But the data tells a slightly different story. It turns out January is when the decision to divorce spikes. People go through a tense holiday season, what some call the holiday hold, and decide they're done. But the actual legal paperwork, that takes a little more time.
And this chart just lays it all out perfectly. The real peak for filing for divorce isn't January, it's March. That's after people have had time to find a lawyer, get their documents together, and maybe even file one last joint tax return. And see that other little peak? That's in August, when couples try to get everything settled before the new school year starts.
Okay, so let's shift gears from when to where, because that national average we talked about, it hides these huge differences across the country. There's a really clear geographic pattern to all this, something people have started calling the divorce belt.
So here's the bottom line. Divorce rates are consistently highest down in the South and parts of the West. A lot of that's linked to things like people getting married younger. And then you have the complete opposite in the Northeast, which has the lowest rates. And that lines up with having more people with college degrees who tend to marry later in life. This whole geographic split points to something even deeper. When you start to look at who is getting divorced, it becomes pretty obvious that there are basically 2 different Americas when it comes to whether a marriage lasts. Just look at this gap. It's huge. Today, having a college degree has become one of the single strongest predictors of if a marriage is going to make it. For college grads, divorce rates have actually dropped like a rock. But for people without a degree, those rates have stayed really high, which is often tied to things like more economic stress.
But here's where it gets really interesting. While divorce is going down for younger, more educated folks, there's this wild counter-trend happening. For Americans over 50, the divorce rate has literally doubled since 1990. It's called gray divorce, and it's all about people living longer and feeling like, hey, I have time to start over.
And what about after a divorce? Well, a lot of people remarry, but the stats show the odds get a lot tougher each time you try. The risk for a first marriage is already pretty high, but for a second one, it jumps up to around 60%. And a third? Wow, that's over 70%. Blended families and financial stuff just make it way more complicated.
Now, to really wrap our heads around all this, we need to zoom out one last time and put our 1.89 divorces per minute into a bit of historical perspective. Because the whole idea of what marriage even is has changed so much over the last several decades. This timeline really tells the whole story. You see a little spike right after World War II? Sure. But then, bam, the rate just exploded during what's called the divorce revolution, peaking around 1980 at about 2.3 divorces every minute. So, and this is the key insight, our number today, 1.89, isn't some crazy new high. It's actually a pretty big drop from that peak.
So why the drop? Well, sociologists have this great way of explaining it. They say marriage has shifted from being a cornerstone, the first block you lay down to start your adult life, to being a capstone. A capstone is the final piece you put in place after you've got your education, your career, and your finances all sorted out.
And honestly, that's the single biggest takeaway from all of this. The slow decline from 2.3 divorces a minute down to 1.89 doesn't necessarily mean we're all in stronger, happier marriages. What it really means is that the group of people getting married in the first place has changed. They're older, they're more educated, and they're more financially stable from the get-go.
And that leaves us with this one last really big question to chew on. If marriage is becoming more and more of this exclusive capstone, something achieved by a smaller, more elite group, what does that mean for the future of the American family and for the social fabric of the country? That's something for all of us to think about.